let's talk about today the Andor Season 2 finale. The last three episodes have aired. Now, with that in mind, I will be obviously talking about spoilers, even though we already know how the show ends. But we weren't really sure how it gets from point A to point B. So technically, there are spoilers. We're going to talk about them, and we're also going to talk about kind of overall thoughts because this is the end of the Andor show and where it falls in our timeline. So without further ado, let's talk about episode 10. It was called Make It Stop. So for each one, I'm going to bring you to this kind of visual guide we have on screen here. It'll tell you kind of a synopsis of the episode. So if you want to read it rather than listen to me, um, so you know what the episode's about, that's fine. Or if you get kind of confused, this is kind of just a general guideline for you. But it's called Make It Stop, and it follows 1 year again after the previous three episodes. That's how their arc's been 1 year in between each three episode arc to explain the movement of time. And then usually the first episode is like a setup for the next two to kind of get you back on track and then get you back like to find out where you are and get back here. But that wasn't the case here today. Um, So a little bit of change of pace here. So this episode is mainly about Luthen and what happened to him pretty much by being left there at the ISB operations. I'm just going to turn this down a little bit. It's loud in my ears. I turned it up and hopefully turned it down for you guys a little bit. It's a Star Wars mix of music that we listen to while we're listening to me babble live. That way you guys don't have to just listen to dead silence of me babbling. So Luthen meets at the beginning of the episode with the ISB agent Young, who's his mole plant there, and he said that he, on like a park bench, Young tells Luthen that he burned himself. He used his access codes to get into Dedra Mira's files, and or Dedra, sorry. Which, by the way, I just found out. Like her voice was always so familiar, and I was like, she's a good actress. I don't know why she hasn't been cast before. She's freaking Yennefer. Dedra is Yennefer in the Witcher voice games, and I was like, ah, that is why I'm drawn to you. You've got the voice. Um, he anyway, Young goes in through Dedra's files and finds all of this stuff about basically, essentially, the Death Star, but it's linking all of the things going around the Empire on Jeddah after the Kyber crystals and that sort of stuff. Um, Everything that they're doing for the Emperor's energy program is actually to build the Death Star. Shocker, I know, to all of us who've been fans for a while. But Luthen then promises, like once he tells him that he's going to get him off planet to Yavin, but obviously Luthen knows that's the loose end. Luthen kills Young and realizes he has limited time to leave, so he goes and lets Clea know who's his assistant that we got to go, and he goes, I will handle the destruction of information. You will go. And like again, Luthen just realizing that his job is to eventually sacrifice himself once the game's over. He knows where this is headed. So he goes over there and he starts erasing the data. He has a plan for running. And Dedra Miro, the ISB agent, stops over at the shop and shows, she pretends to be a buyer. Obviously, he knows with her showing up that this is not going to go well. He shows her, or she shows him, and it's kind of her like bad guy speech moment. The first ever thing that he stole or tried to purchase from Cassian that they recovered during that first thing on Ferrix, and that's when he knows that the jig is up, and she knows that she's caught her man. But in her arrogance, she didn't realize that he was going, even though he was cornered and caught, that he would take things a step further. And he used a sacrificial knife from his shop to try to kill himself. She recovers and or she recovers this body and sends him off to the hospital, trying to keep him alive because she wants the information in his brain. And she realizes how bad she screwed up, letting him hurt himself. Um, you get kind of starts of little flashbacks at this point. And Luthen also kind of gets the last word in against Deidre, saying that it's too late. I've already started the rebellion. It's already moved on from here. You've caught nothing. You've just caught what's left. Um, before he stabs himself. But you start getting flashbacks, and you realize that Luthen met his assistant as a young girl. It wasn't very clear. It almost seems like he was an Imperial officer or an officer of some kind, but his name was Sergeant. I wrote it down here. Sergeant Rio? Not no, that's Lear. Lear. His actual name is Sergeant Lear. We don't know anything else about him, but he took part in some sort of a massacre. He didn't want to hear the radio anymore. He was having trouble dealing with it, being the commanding officer of this thing. And a girl was hiding on his ship. He told her to shush, and he'll take care of it. And from there, I'm guessing being haunted by the PTSD of his war crimes, um, and recovering this girl, he started on the course of a new life of rebellion, making amends for what he did. Um, Meanwhile, you see that uh, in live time now we've got Lutheran over at the hospital with Deidre Mira overlooking his body, just kind of like a shark, telling everybody, she's trying to take over the hospital, say, keep this man alive. And the second he wakes up, he needs to be questioned by tomorrow. All this stuff. She needs all the information. She's getting desperate because she knows she messed up. The ISB actually shows up and arrests Deidre Mira, saying that she overstepped her bounds and it's gone too far this time and she's got people to answer to. So they're going to bring her in to answer for her mistakes and overstepping and running her own rogue operation, which resulted in a loss of intel. And then in the meantime, Clea has started breaking into the hospital like an expert little assassin that Luthen trained, and she's dressed right there in that picture. You can see her as a nurse um, to sneak in, and you get more flashbacks at this point of her growing up, being taught basically how to be a good negotiator, her doing her first, attending her first Imperial execution where she didn't want to look away, and then actually going through with her first ever terrorist rebellion bombing. And even in that moment, Luthen was trying to protect her by pressing the button for her so she didn't have to carry that guilt. So he gave her the choice of whether she wanted to walk away or not. It was clear she was going to stay, and he was like, "Nope, I'm going to hit the button. You are going to focus on me, and then we're going to look over like we're shocked, and then we're going to walk away." So he was teaching her how to play the game as a young girl. And that's pretty much how the episode ends. Clea then is shown in real time. She bombs the hospital and proceeds to take Luthen off of life support. And Luthen dies. So she does her job silencing that last little possible piece of information that fell into the Empire's hands. But in doing so, she had to basically kill her father. Um, that was the end of that episode. That was a solid A. And so for me, I mean, it was damn near my favorite episode. If it had a little bit more gravity to it like the previous ones did, I would say that it was S tier because of how well it was written. Um, Normally it threw me off because that first episode is normally a throwaway episode building up to the other two. And it was more like the opposite on this arc, that this one it started high and started kind of leveling down. And I'll explain the reasons why, that's a good thing when they were doing these episodes. But he was my favorite character of the show, Luthen. He was by far the most compelling to me, new character that they had. Um, Seeing him go down the way that he predicted was just masterful storytelling. He knew he was going down. He knew that he was just a master chess player. He played right into his position, got everything he wanted and got every like even in the end, um, one last little life lesson to Clea while protecting her. It was suspenseful. It added more depth to all the characters that we already had. Dedra was back to being unhinged, which was great to see. Given her last episode, she was very scared. Um, she was back to her maniacal fanaticism that I loved about her character being built up for the Empire. And I went a little narrative deep here. You guys would be proud of me. She got her white whale. She got her Moby Dick, but it cost her. Um, she finally pulled everything off. Everything was as a in her vision of what she was going to say to him when she caught Axis, and then all of a sudden it turned into a nightmare, and it got even worse. So everything she was obsessed with and cared about and helping just came crashing down around her when she got arrested. And then we finally again got a good episode at the start of everything moving forward. So I was again solid A, just coming off those high episodes, still high, still suspenseful, still that spy drama, coming down. And what was weird is it was all Luthen focused, which I thought was very appropriate given we don't need to skip around at this point. We're trying to wrap up stories, and his was a big arc we had to wrap up, so it was nice to get it just focused on him and his backstory. And the unexpected backstory for Clea in particular was amazing. It was just I didn't think we were going to get anything from her for her backstory because we didn't have a lot of time, but also like she's just his helper. I thought maybe they were going to focus on him, but getting more on her made her way more compelling uh, going forward. Even though the show's about to end, it was very invested in her character by the time this episode ended. So we move on to episode 11. This one was, spoiler alert, by far the weakest of the group, but it's not bad. Um, it starts out with let me move this episode over here so you can see the title here. It's called Who Else Knows? And you can see that Krennic is front and center on this one, and that's because the opening scene on episode 11 was um, Director Krennic questioning Dedra Meero. He turns the cameras off and stuff, and he goes in there, and he basically wants to know from her in a really compelling scene, by the way, who else knows about the Death Star. They're trying to control this information leaking, and she bungled it up so much that he wants to know from her why. And he calls her out specifically for being, he doesn't use these words, but being so arrogant. And he's like, I don't know how someone so smart and so able to get all this information would be so stupid to go in there by yourself to apprehend this person and let this, fall out of our imperial control and let him die before we question him, basically. Um, then Clea, meanwhile, is on the run, and she sends an SOS to Yavin 4 through like a little machine that they have in their safe house. Um, the ISB finds out that it was Clea through the camera footage at the hospital, issues an alert for her, and says she's got an infectious disease. She escaped from the hospital. Um, Again, just kind of covering their tracks. They can't say, "Oh, she knows about the Death Star," and they're like, "Wait, what? What's a Death Star?" So it was kind of cool to see them kind of scavenging like that. Krennic then makes an excuse that he was overdue in Scarif 2 days ago and starts to head off to Scarif, which that's kind of our little red flag that we're not going to see Krennic again because we know that's where he ends up. We are switching this music, just turning on some weird, sexy sax from Star Wars. Um, but yeah, Krennic goes to Scarif. Cassian gets the SOS from his friend Will on Yavin, and that's the SOS that Luthen would have used. So Cassian disobeys orders, and now again it's been 1 year forward. The rebellion's now even more organized or more militaristic than ever. You need like clearance to take your ship off planet here. Um, Cassian again disobeys orders and goes to rescue his friend Luthen for one final extraction from Coruscant. Gets in trouble as he's leaving. Told he leans to K2SO, who's now doing poker nights with Cassian because they're bestest of friends after 1 year. And god damn, dude, I'll talk about it later, but K2SO, man, he's such a good addition for the final 2 episodes. Um, he gets the SOS, takes off with Cassian in his U-wing, which was cool to see the U-wing again, to go rescue him. And he takes one of his friends with him, who's also a rebel leader or rebel like platoon sergeant, one of their poker buddies. And they go all the way to Coruscant. They meet with Clea. Clea then verbally passes this information on to Cassian. She doesn't want to leave. Cassian's like, "I'm not leaving you here. Like, are you crazy? You can't stay." And they're starting to form their plan to escape. But in their last minute attempts to meet with each other through Imperial ISB monitoring, they were able to narrow down their location and send a strike ship to go apprehend where they think Clea is. They block all transmissions. So at the end of the episode, we get kind of this build up to a pressure point where the strike team is moving in to arrest Cassian and Clea. K2SO has no more comms for them anymore, and it looks like they're about to butt heads. And then the episode just cuts to black, and I was just sitting there like, not only was this the shortest episode, because you can see I'm already done talking about it, it was clearly building up. This was our suspense building episode where they were just moving pieces into place for the finale. So it is what it is. It's like a C plus, B minus. The only reason I want to say B minus is because K2SO was in there. This was again just our setup for the finale. It was still intense and there was some moving parts, so it was a little bit more enjoyable than some of the drier pieces we had previously. But it was not bad. And K2SO was friggin' awesome having him back. It's sad that it took 20 episodes for them to rehab that friendship between Cassian and K2SO. Even their little banter was fantastic. Every time they were on the screen, it was chef's kiss. It was brilliant. And maybe they were afraid having too much of it would be a problem. But anyway, B minus for the episode. It was just kind of setting it up there, maybe C plus. It was just kind of everything, and I want to be clear too. Even on the crappy episodes of the show, everything is well written, um, well acted, well produced, great music, great lines, great acting from everyone involved. So when I give it a bad grade, it's because compared to the other episodes, like the ones we got last week that were like knocked out of the park, near perfect, um, it just doesn't like you're kind of sitting there like, ugh, next episode, please. Like I'm not gonna if I ever rewatch Andor, I'm not gonna be like looking forward to this one that was a setup. And then finale. Let's move on to our finale episode, which was called Jedha Kyber Urso. And the reason why they did it that way was because that's the information that Cassian was supposed to maintain. She's like, repeat it, Jedha, Kyber, Urso. You need these. These are the key words you need to remember. I don't want you forgetting. But there's the description for you. Um, so this episode, a lot more stuff happens in the plot here. So bear with me on this one. It's a little bit longer than the last one. Um, we got the ISB raid. Remember that pressure point is happening here. So the ISB raid happens, and their comms are jammed and everything. K2SO, while that pressure point is building with them moving down the hallway like a SWAT team to extract them out of the apartment. Meanwhile, the ISB team is like secured the area and moved in there. Cassian and them are just sitting in the apartment talking about the information and how best to leave. Basically, they have no idea that these guys are coming up. K2SO realizes that something's wrong with the comms being down, so he starts just owning people left and right. Like that's his big and I'm gonna give him a nice little from SN-33 because my God, and maybe this is the
This
way,
is the way.
because he just walked right out there as this new murder bot, and he has so much personality with Alan Tudyk doing the voice for him. And he just starts wrecking Imperial troops that just harm. Like he thinks that he's an Imperial droid, and he's just like knocking people off bridges. He goes over to the Imperial command ship and disables the comms, so ISB can't talk to each other anymore. And so now it's a comms blackout for both teams. And he's basically freeing up the escape route. He's coming from behind that SWAT team, just taking out troop after troop after troop by himself. And Cassian then leaves to go in the hallway, or his buddy does first, and the troops are right outside the door when he comes out. So they start, screaming out like a SWAT team. We're ISB, hands in the air, and the guy runs back into the apartment, and they have no idea what to do at this point. It's just coming into a pressure cooker with them right around the corner. They throw a stun grenade in. They're coming in to pick up Cassian, and all of a sudden, there's lots of noise and firing behind because K2SO, sure enough, has made his way down the hallway, and he picks up. This is the best part of the whole show for me. K2SO picks up the ISB little worm agent that's supposed to be kind of like the new Cyril on the show. He had a lot of Cyril in him, um, who was hiding in the back of the SWAT team, and then uses him as a body shield like this, walking down the hallway, just blocking him while the troops shoot into it, trying to hit the droid behind it, but they can't because he's using this dead body as a body shield as he's walking through. So they just keep having to shoot the poor ISB admiral or supervisor like over and over and over. Long story short, K2SO just owns everyone in that hallway and saves Cassian and them. Cassian and them return to Yavin once they get out of that the building, and they are greeted very rudely because they're basically under arrest for being a what's the word, AWOL. Yeah, they were AWOL from and the rebellion, like I said, is more organized now. They're more militaristic. They have rules, so they're immediately put at gunpoint and arrested. K2SO is told to power off. The other two are uh, told to go back to their quarters, and one is sent to medical. And Cassian is then brought before the rebel leadership. And I thought it was, just as a side note, a great little flavor here. They had Saw Gerrera on the hologram right before that, and they were trying to convince him to be part of the meeting. And he was just like so paranoid and so out there that he was like, I don't trust any. He's like, y'all can have your whatever meetings you want. I'm gonna keep fighting out here. So like, it was just nice to see a little soft flavor mixed into the soup there. Um, but it was basically the rebel leadership. So Mon Mothma, Bail Organa, um, Admiral Raddus was there at the time. Um, I'm not sure who some of the other people were at the table, but they had a couple other leadership people there, and they wanted, to know what Cassian had to say. So Cassian tells them that Luthen is dead, and the critical information that a weapon is being built, um, and it's critical that that they do something about it because the rumors are he doesn't know what kind of weapon it is, but it's big and he needs kyber crystals for it. And, all this stuff is adding up. All these things are together. And the rebel leadership kind of just goes, um, that this is all rumors. There's nothing factual. They keep, Cassian keeps telling them, hey, Luthen died for this, and you don't seem to understand what kind of person Luthen was. Like, if he put his life on the line for this, this is important, and I believe him. And they were like, well, we don't know Luthen. And Cassian just goes to bat for Luthen, which in a cool monologue about how they haven't sacrificed a tenth or half of what he has sacrificed to get things done, and that we all owe him, and they take a break. Um, and Cassian goes back to his house to kind of think about things, and everyone's got some stuff to chew on from there. Meanwhile, they show the ISB director who was in charge of all this stuff, the entire show, um, kind of just sitting in an empty office, and somebody comes in behind him and says, "It's time to go. We need to go. I'm supposed to bring you down to report to these people." And he kindly asks the guy, he's like, "Do you mind if I take a moment to collect my thoughts?" And the guy nods, walks outside the door, and he already knows what's going to happen, um, because the director then shoots himself in the head with his blaster, and he stops the stormtroopers from going in to try to save him or anything. He's like, "Let the man, let the man cook. He's deserved the right to take his own life here." So he took the honorable way out rather than, or I guess some people would say the coward's way out. But he didn't want to see his empire lose, and he realized he lost the game and he got outplayed, and his place was going to be not good where he was going. So he ended his own life in his own terms. Again, very dark thing to see in Star Wars, but this one was a little bit more of the George Lucas realm where you just hear the noise. You don't actually see it happen. So it was much more palatable than some of the other stuff in the show. Um, in terms of Star Wars culture and how information is typically presented to us. Um, Meanwhile, back on Yavin, Vel is sent over. Vel Mothma is sent by Mon Mothma, saying, "I need you to meet with Cassian and see if you believe him. I'm not going to say what he told me. I want you to hear it, and I want you to come back to me and tell me how you feel, because I want to believe him, but I just don't know, and I want to know how you feel without tainting the info." So she goes and has some drinks. They have a nice scene where they're drinking to all their fallen comrades and all the planets. And they said there's not enough alcohol here to be able to toast to everybody we need to. So they just kind of do everybody at once. Um, they have a talk about what happened. Obviously, Vel believes him. And on her way out of that meeting, she's gonna go tell Mothma that she does believe him. They run into Clea walking up the path over to that hut. So Vel grabs Clea and brings her back, um, to her tent to catch up with her. Cassian, meanwhile, in the morning, is sent by his commander that he needs to meet with someone named Terex, who is his contact from Rogue One. So now we've officially gotten the orders for Cassian to be where he needs to be at the beginning of Rogue One. Um, Bale agrees that it should be Cassian, that goes, and that Cassian asks, like, why the change of heart on me and the change of heart on everything with this rebellion. And he goes, "I'd rather go down swinging than go down guessing," basically. And Cassian tells him, you have a lot in common with Lutheran, although you might not like to admit it. Um, so now we get into kind of a final montage. So Cassian is they and it was actually very beautiful. So if you do get a chance to see it, I would recommend at least watching that portion. Um, it was just a little montage with some great Andor music playing from Rogue One and from Andor, and it was a nice intermixture of kind of catching us up with the characters that are still alive and how they're moving into position. So it showed Cassian approaching his ship to get on there with K2SO to go to that planet where he's at the start at Rogue One. Oh, and I forgot to mention too before this, Vel does a brief little name drop of Bix and goes, "She's safe," to Cassian. Cassian doesn't want to know where she's safe. Um, he, but Bix goes, "You may want to check in with her before it's, you know, things go too far, too late." Basically saying she loves you. She would love to hear from you, but it's Cassian. The whole reason why she left was to not distract Cassian, right? So it's going through that overall, letting us know where everyone is. And one of the more jaw-dropping moments is when you see that Dedra is in prison, and she is in the prison that Cassian was in, wearing the same orange jumpsuit that he was in the first season. So her life is completely tanked to the opposite side, where she's being treated as a traitor to the Empire and buried in this prison that she will never escape. Um, the rebellion's all shown as formalized, very militaristic. They're even doing military drills at this point. Clea is kind of shown having her fresh start on Yavin, kind of walking around and eating breakfast and being kind of a normal person in and on the outside of this rebellion now. Um, and then we also get to see, I mean, like I said, everyone's kind of moving towards Rogue One. We also get to see Krennic supervising the Death Star being completed, and it ends. Um, the last little two things, one's on Cassian and one's on Bix, and Bix is back on the wheat cornfield planet that they started at the beginning of this season, living in that same community that B2EMO lives on, which thankfully they didn't just leave him to die. It's been so many years. But I genuinely thought that guy was going to be in K2SO, but he's there. He's alive. And he's living with Bix, and Bix is holding a child. And that's kind of how it ends, with everybody moving in place for Rogue One. And it's presumed that that child is Cassian's. So overall, this episode I thought was a B. Not much happened in this movie, but it connected the show and the series to the movie flawlessly and perfectly and predictably. Um, it even added a little flavor with like what happened with Dedra and Clea and all that stuff. So it was like it was a nice, like, we have to get from point A to point B somehow. It can't be super action packed leading into the action movie. So it's obviously we started here on the show, right? So now we're coming coming down and settling in to Rogue One. Um, so overall, even though I think the episode itself wasn't as good as some of the other ones that were in the show, it was a very nice wrap up to the show. And oh, it did show Saw Gerrera too on Jeddah and all that stuff. But a very nice wind down um, on all the story arcs, so we know where everyone is. I don't think anyone was really left open ended. There were some people that were left as just kind of part of the rebellion, like Vel and Bix and um, Clea. But now we've got just future characters you can add in different stories that are still alive. It would have been nice to know what happened to them, or get some wrap up to how they fared in the war, or if they're still alive um, past the rebellion. Guess we'll find out maybe in some future stuff, but they're still there. So I mean, they're able. Not everyone dies, right? So you got a nice open ending with that. Overall, the arc I thought was just like a B minus. It was a nice ending. It really did a good job of being predictable and stuff. Just didn't have a whole lot of action compared to where we just came from, right? We just came off those massive episodes that were like peak Star Wars for some people, and then we were just evening it out, right, as we're leaving. It can't end on those high marks because the show itself is ending. But it's pretty much what we predicted. It did feel like a downgrade, but it's just that's not, without a doubt, that's not a bad thing. The only real question mark I had was Bix herself. She was just I I'm gonna say this nicely. I felt the challenging part of Bix as a character and the romance interest to Andor, and I said this in the last episode, was that she needed to die at some point, because Cassian ends up dying in Rogue One, and he's not sitting there holding a picture of Bix when he dies. He's sitting there hugging Jin or so. Um, and honestly, people thought they should have kissed at that moment. But I'm glad that they didn't, and then they were just friends and whatnot. But so it was, in my opinion, the tough part was after you show this girl getting sexually assaulted, you're going to have to kill her at some point in some tragic death, right? No, they had her leave a Dear John later. I was like, okay, well, that leaves her able to survive. That's kind of a creative way to keep her alive, whatever. But you got to keep her off the show at that point, right? And then Connor from the Beyond the Dune Sea podcast was guessing where he thought the character would go, and I actually liked his ending better, where she was um, back on Ferrix with maybe she's pregnant or maybe she has a kid, and that they lay the brick for Cassian on Ferrix, and I was like, oh, well, that's kind of a creative ending. But instead, we got this one where she's just back at the wheat fields where she got sexually assaulted, living peacefully out there. I guess that's brave, going back to the scene of where you were at and being able to get past those dark shadows. So you got to give her character credit for that. But in general, I thought it was very sad the way they ended Cassian now, because now Cassian, his friend dies in Rogue One in K2SO, then he dies there, not ever knowing that the love of his life had his kid, and maybe he would have never gone on that mission had she just stayed there and they had a kid. And I mean, he's obviously they put their stuff important, but it made his story way more tragic. Um, that he dies and he's got a kid. Now that does leave it kind of open ended to what how special this kid's going to be when he gets older, being the kid of Bix and Cassian. But that's way down the road. Be interesting to see if they ever do anything with that. It was at the end of the arc. It kind of felt sad. I was like, oh, now she's a single mom and she left her husband and he died. I was like, that's got to make her even more upset. I was like, that doesn't sound great. I liked the other ending where they were just paying homage, um, and you still have that same like she had a kid, but they're like, let me teach you about your father. You he was a hero and he deserves to be at Ferrix's brick wall too. Um, so that was the whole show. Overall, I would say season two was A minus. I thought it was, again, everything I've been saying from the get go. Fantastic show, and I'm not saying Star Wars show. Show. It was well written, well acted, well directed, great sound, great action, great suspense. But it is, at its heart, just a different genre um, than what we're used to in Star Wars. And again, not a bad thing. One of the things everyone's been pointing out is like people are like, well, it doesn't feel like Star Wars. Well, you know what felt like Star Wars is Acolyte, Obi-Wan, Book of Boba Fett. All those felt like Star Wars. They were not as good. Now, however, that being said, even though I feel like this season was great, and let's move into the show overall too. I felt like overall the show this season was better than the first season. It had a little lull to start it, but then it ramped up right in the middle and it ended well. Um, Overall, I still think this is kind of like a B plus on the Star Wars spectrum of shows. The main reason for it is because I don't find it very rewatchable. It was a great medium to portray some information and the gritty stuff that's going on between the rebellion and the empire. And everyone's positives were like, oh man, it's nice to not have the lightsabers and just see what real people were like in that time. You're like, you're absolutely right. But I signed up for the lightsabers and the wizards, the force powers, and the fantasy adventure of it. So to me, that's what Star Wars is. Doesn't mean I didn't like this. I like this quite a bit. But when I'm going to go rewatch it, and I just had this is the greatest example I could give. I just rewatched Ahsoka um, in the mornings while I was getting ready for work, and I couldn't wait to watch the next episode and see Thrawn and see the Night Troopers and see Sabine and all the lightsaber fights between Balin and them, the Night Sisters and all them, or the Great Mothers, excuse me. Um, and I realized that I would much rather watch Ahsoka, which I consider to be in every way, in terms of how you would rate a show, it would be inferior to Andor. It is more enjoyable and rewatchable than Andor. And it's only because of the genre that it's in that I can say that. And again, my opinion. So I would much rather watch something like Skeleton Crew, um, Ahsoka, oh, even Obi-Wan over Andor because Andor is a little tough for me to watch. It's like it's more political drama, sci-fi, all this stuff. And because I now know the story, I probably wouldn't rewatch the whole thing from start to finish again. I would probably just watch my favorite episodes. So I don't need all the little filler detail information stuff. I can just watch all the exciting episodes that I enjoy. That's just me. Now, that being said, because of how well directed and adult themed this was, and gritty and dark, but not too dark, whenever someone's like, this is my favorite I've ever seen in Star Wars, 100%. That's fine with me. That it just, in my opinion, you want Star Wars to be more of a different genre than it was prior, which is fine. It's a place to tell these stories. So fantastic show, loved it. I still think again I would put it more in the B tier of like if I'm rewatching Star Wars, it would be on the good end of stuff, but it's just kind of not super rewatchable to me. But overall, I think the show added a lot of depth to the characters. Um, it was originally planned to be a 5 season arc, which I think was so smart that they didn't do that because my God, it would have ruined the show's pacing. Um, this was perfect. There was episodes that were dry and boring and hard to sit through at moments, but overall it moved. And that's all you can really ask for a political drama like this. So I'm glad that they did it. I'm glad that it's over. I'm glad that it connected the way it was supposed to and they didn't have any like crazy surprises. Like that's when shows end, I want it to be predictable. I don't want a Game of Thrones moment where like the writer tries to surprise me. Um, I want it to be an ending that I'm okay with, and it like I might be like, well, I could have done a little bit better job, but in general, this is right where it's supposed to be. This is what it was expected to be when it ended. So I was very very glad for this. But it again, it does feel like a little bit of a tragic show now that you get more in depth on casting. He's not just some dude that died in Rogue One now. He's got a lot of depth to him. And my final critique is just on this man on the screen here. He was god tier in the last 2 episodes. Um, but I don't know how you have a show called Andor when his primary companion K2SO only you get 20 something episodes and hours of shows and he only gets into 2 hours of the 20. I don't know how that's possible. I don't know how as a showrunner you didn't find a way to make this happen and I don't know how like more often and I don't know how B2 EMO didn't just get placed inside of K2SO. That seemed like a home run from the get-go. Like somebody whiffed on that one. But either way, he ended up good, well written. I was very happy with the show as a whole, and I would recommend it to anyone, but with the caveat that it is a different genre than you're used to in Star Wars. So it may or may not be a good thing. Like I would not like recommend like our buddy just watched this with his kids. I would not recommend this show as a Star Wars show you show to kids. And I think, George always wanted it to be for kids. However, he was looking into underworld stuff and HBO programming and all that stuff. So I think, eventually he wanted to go to all mediums. So I don't think that he would have a problem with the way that this show is presented. Just as a personal note, too, I agree with a lot of the commentators out there that this dude who's running this show, the Gilroy brothers, I think is their names. They while they did a fantastic job with everything, they played a little fast and loose with the lore sometimes, and they weren't stopped, and that makes me nervous for future projects. Now they didn't really overstep their bounds, but came close, and they trotted that line several times, and even sometimes they made good choices, and sometimes they made choices, but they came close to lore issues, which always bothers me as a fan. So like as a fan, I'm passionate about lore and canon and all that stuff for a reason. It's important to me. And when you just go, whatever, we don't need it. I need it for this scene. It's very arrogant. So just tone it down, guys. But golf clap, good job. Um, Probably where's this rank with the Disney shows? Um, it's pretty much Mandalorian, Rogue One, Andor, Ahsoka. To me, are like of the live action, are the ones that Disney has really done well on. Um, they're still at maybe 60% success rate, which is not good, but we'll get them there. We'll get them there. Got to have faith in the mouse, I guess, that's the dangerous thing to have. All right, guys. That's it for Andor review. Hopefully, I didn't ramble on for too crazy long. Good.